What's happening? How you
Hi,
doing?
Brian. You're going to sporting a New York Yankees hat now, huh?
Yeah, New York.
That's where it's at.
Actually, I just like their colors and stuff. So
Oh, because it's
actually,
blue.
yeah, I'm a Atlanta Braves fan.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
So who is their farm team for Atlanta? Is it Nashville or is that?
They probably have a lot of them.
Yeah, because
I
I
think
know.
their AAA is Richmond, isn't it?
Is it Richmond?
Oh,
And
okay,
the
Virginia.
Richmond Braves, maybe.
Okay.
Unless they changed. There was a lot of changing happening.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's true.
I don't know. It looks like everybody's here, and Jennifer won't be here right tonight. I guess we get started. It is May 18th, 2021. The Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. The board members present are Beryl Pickle Antonio, Daphne Morney, and Matthew Campbell. So if we want to get started, I guess we'll start out with Mike Verlingo going over like the April financials. Unless anyone has anything that they want to say prior to us getting started. Okay, Mike, it's you.
Okay, well, as you know, we delayed the review of the forecast until next Wednesday. So we'll piggyback on the COVID and curriculum meeting. So tonight we'll just have the financials, and I have an update on food service, which is a good news story, and one or two other items. So, all right, first, let me see if I can share the screen. Oh, host disabled participant screen sharing.
You can't catch a break, can you, Mike?
Oh, Lord. So is Matt.
All right, it should be good now. I don't know why it always defaults to having that turned off, but I turned it back on for you.
Okay. And then let's see if I could find the schedules. So they're not there. Okay, so.
I'm sure they're one of those icons on your homepage.
See, I can open it here, but I don't. So let me. Uh-oh. Sorry, I think I exited by mistake. Okay. All right, that's not.
We see your calendar, Mike.
Yeah, that's not what I needed. So I have it open on my screen, but it's not coming up where I can.
So once you share and the screen sharing is up, if you just move your cursor over to what you want to share and press,
Okay.
you'll be able to get it.
Oh, there it is. Now it popped up. It wasn't on my screen before. Not sure why that happens, like if they're in different places. Okay, so if we go through April results. Okay, that's a little bigger, I think. So year-to-date revenues, we're still exceeding estimates, mostly again for the same reasons. So the TIF, I did break out, Daphne, as you had requested, for the tax settlements. So you can see our tax settlements year-to-date were 709,000 versus last year 200,000. Looking ahead to next year, and this is an adjustment like for the forecast, currently we only have about 100,000 in committed settlement receipts, and then there will be some additions on top of that, so I would expect it to drop back down to the 200,000 range. On the TIFs, we're exceeding, and I do expect that to continue. So next year we will see a benefit from what previously would have been forecasted. On the state foundation side, again, there was a change where they increased our foundation funding mid-year. So we're now seeing an increase over what the estimate would have been. So overall, about 4 million in operating revenues, higher than what would have been projected. 9 million over last year due to mostly the tax receipts. On the expenditure side, again, tracking under salaries and wages were expected to be slightly under at year end. Fringe benefits will continue to track under. Purchase service and materials are currently being analyzed more closely, especially in terms of the open purchase orders. So we have a significant amount of purchase orders that are open right now in the area of purchase services. Less so in terms of the impact on supplies, but that's a key area here in the forecasting and where we're going to end up for the year. So currently still analyzing that. Capital, we do expect additional expenditures on the capital side when we pay for equipment that has been ordered and will be received in this May and June timeframe.
Hey, Mike, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
As far as like the open purchase orders and stuff like that, is there a time that you've given everyone, teachers and staff, et cetera, to get in whether it's the bill or the invoice before you close them out? I mean,
Yeah, we actually, we cut off requisitions just on the 14th. So no more requisitions can be processed unless it's a grant related item or auxiliary funds. So we limit that now so that we don't see any more activity. So everyone was in a rush to get everything in, before that deadline, which is one reason it tends to drive up the amount of open purchase orders. There's also a push to get all invoices in because we typically do our final check run about 10 to 14 days prior to year end. So that we have time to analyze and adjust all balances. Again, that can be modified depending upon if something comes in that's material that we want to get paid. So I tend to start tracking those very closely on a daily basis once we get to the cutoff point. This way, anytime something comes in to be paid, it's an offset between either having open encumbrance and or showing the expenditure in the current year. No impact to the net number because encumbrances are one of the lines on the forecast. So it's an increase in one, decrease in the other. But again, it needs to be tracked so that we make sure that we are within appropriations and adjust all our numbers accordingly so we're within limits.
Mike, I had two questions. With regard to salaries and wages, we have, it seems like a lot of retirees or resignations. Do we have enough in our contra account for retirements
No, that's one of the adjustments we'll be making. We'll be doing a transfer at year end. Currently, I'm estimating about 150,000 of additional amount needed for severance payments.
So that 306 will basically drop down to 156.
Well, those actually go through the 035 fund. So they won't necessarily show up in the salary and wage line. When I forecast out salaries and wages, that's specifically, base salaries, overtime, substitutes, supplementals, and that type of thing. I can actually show you the chart if you'd like.
That's okay.
Okay.
I just didn't know if you would get the source of the funds versus an additional appropriation, if the source of the funds could be salaries and wages since it's not going to be used.
Or actually, by year end, we're only within about $30,000.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
How about the fringe benefit line?
can you see this chart?
I see the financial report as was presented. in
Okay, so when I click on this, it doesn't automatically come up. Okay. But I do have a spreadsheet that I can show you that shows the estimate of where we'll end up on salaries and wages.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, and it gets much closer.
Okay, great. I mean, I like it when so with regard to the fringe benefits, the insurances and other benefits, we're up 1.1 million, or we're under 1.1. Is that line going to have contraction as well?
No, actually, we are going to end up the year, and this was based on the the forecast in terms of the original appropriation based on last May. That was updated in November, so it's something less than that. But we're still going to underrun, definitely, in benefits. Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to piggyback on that question. With part of the insurance committee, because of the overages that people have been have their actual premiums that have been paid overages, and the city was we were at a position as to what the school wanted to do as far as the match. I don't know if this is the forum to where we discuss that, but I know that was one of the concerns that in the insurance committee meeting as to they're wanting the overage as far as premiums to go towards potential self-funding, and whereas the school district did not pay into their portion. So they were saying they thought we were in agreement that the school district continues to pay their portion and all of it goes towards the self-funding. So I don't know, like I say, that was one of the concerns in the insurance committee meeting.
Yeah, what happened, Brian, back several months ago, Medical Mutual discounted their premium for 1 month, and it was about a $250,000 impact to this school district contribution. We actually made the contribution at the total amount. What I was proposing, because what I had discussed back at that prior meeting was, and I thought there was an understanding, but I guess we weren't clear. I didn't see why we would put in the extra money because the bill had been discounted. And the discussion centered around, would we rebate the contributions made by the employees? And they decided no, they did not want to do that. So we had a little bit of a disconnect. What I've basically rationalized is that the money that goes into the self-insurance fund is money that would be used to offset future premiums. And if we do go back to self-funding, there'll be a benefit by both the district and the employees in terms of the cost. So I'm okay with, my original position was I would think we would not want to fund for the additional money that we did not need to pay. But I'm okay with leaving it in the fund.
Don't we have a contract through a certain period of time with
It's an annual contract that runs from January through December. But they gave us, as I guess they did all of their clients, a discount in 1 month because COVID-related activity was, showing much less usage of, medical services. So they were maybe feeling generous and thought, well, we won't charge the full premium.
Well, there's a lot of moving parts with that, and I don't know that this is the forum to have those conversations, right? I mean,
Could be,
we don't have the data, number one, other than this number, right?
right.
I think a lot of insurance companies did this. MMO saw that our utilization was down because, for so long, basic things like, knee surgeries and things like that people weren't going in for them early in the pandemic. And so the rebate of 300,000 is what that was about. It was about, lack of utilization. I think now utilization's picking up, and I think it will continue to pick up, and we will see greater usage, and I think we already are.
So if you'd like at the next meeting, if we want to, review more detail on the self-insurance fund and, insurance in general, we can add that to the agenda.
I mean, is that a topic that is going to be discussed again in insurance committee? I guess it seems like from my perspective, that should be discussion in the insurance committee. And then if there's a recommendation to us, maybe at that point we discuss it, but that's.
Yeah, I think the only thing is that, it was being discussed, and the union and so forth, they were looking for a commitment out of maybe Mike to say, this is how, basically speak for the board, this is how it's going to be handled, and there was not enough information. So I think even within the committee, we can discuss it, but I still think that, going into those meetings, Mike or whomever needs to know the direction of where the board is. Because like I say, he was there and they basically had him out there as though he had the, authority to make the decision for the board as a whole and for everyone else. So I was just trying to get some clarity, because that's one of the things they were asking for, past notes as far as minutes and things like that. So like I say, it may not be the forum. I just know that prior to going into the next insurance meeting, my preference would be is that there is a clear direction as to what our position is and where we want to go with it. Because they're looking to Mike to make that call, and I don't think that's really appropriate or fair.
To that end, we would have to have a lot more information, like what's the stopgap, what are, the costs related to that, the level that it will hit. I mean, those are all things that affected us the last time around when we were self-insured, and that played a big part in the demise of the self-insurance, right? So we would need to have a much better understanding of the demographics, the base insurance, the stopgap, from all of the factors, not just what it would save from premium perspective, right? So I don't think we have enough information. Mike may not even have enough information unless that has been presented by don't we pay an advisor?
Yes.
I think when all of the information that would be a complete and comprehensive program is compiled and it has validity, that's when it should be presented to the insurance committee. And if it makes it out there, then it comes to us. To me, that makes more sense.
Yeah, I would agree. So if the discussion is geared towards, this is where we are today, this is what the projection is, this is what we need in order to go self-funded again, and how do we get there? And that needs to take place with the consultant. So that will be, a few months, I think, before we can actually have that. Well, I mean, we could do it sooner, but in terms of year end coming up and things, I would tend to say, let's look at July or August for that discussion, because we're certainly not in a position today to think about self-funding.
Well, aren't we committed through July of 22 in our current plan?
That could be, we're committed to, in the negotiated agreement, to medical mutual, to the premiums and any increases that result in terms of annual escalation. That doesn't mean it can't be renegotiated or changed if we get to a position where it made sense to go self-funding, if that would save the district and employees funds.
I'm sorry, Mike. You can go.
That would not happen, for at least, I'm thinking at minimum another year, 18 months before we would be in a position to consider that.
Okay, I'm good, Mike. You can go ahead. I'm sorry for digressing.
No, that's good discussion. It's it is a, it's a high cost item, and, something that needs to be looked at. So if you look at year to date in terms of, surplus, $24 million seems like excessive, but, effectively May and June, there are no or little or no revenues to be received, but we still have, 7, 8, 9 million each month in expenditures. So that number will drop off significantly. In terms of the percentage year-to-date split, local versus state, again, local is a little bit higher, but there are no more local revenues per se to be collected in the next 2 months. So, this percentage will tend to drop back to 78, between 78 and 79%. We are still seeing that trend where local revenues tend to continue to increase. Okay, bank recs. In their packet, there were new statements that were being published by Meter. So for our investments that we hold, or Meter basically invests for us at our direction. They did put together some very nice reports that detail out some of the things that I had on my spreadsheet. So I basically just substituted these so you can look at the detail of each of the bonds and activity in the accounts. And then if we look at the summary sheet, and I apologize that for some reason it cut off FY25. So there are dollars that are out there in FY25, but you can see our rates of return continue to drop. We did invest some bonds longer term at 75 basis points. Treasuries, the same thing, which are out here in FY25. Star Ohio is currently yielding 0.7, and this month the Heartland Bank rate will drop to 0.06. Our agreement basically was up in terms of our 2 basis point increase over STAR. And I think Heartland has significant funds on hand, so they're not necessarily wanting to be, holding 30, 40, $50 million. So there are other vehicles that we can look at short term, where we, especially in the commercial paper space, where we might gain a few more basis points and have that money in 60, 90, up to 180 day commercial paper. The construction funds are down to 4.9 million for Lincoln Elementary. And then, as you can obviously see, the bond and COPS proceeds are the largest holdings, most of which has been invested at this point. Here are detailed reports on spending and checks. All right, in terms of our year-to-date expenditures versus appropriations, we're within limits right now on everything except our ESSER funds. As you know, we had our ESSER 1 funding. So some of this is actually now ESSER 2 that needs to be placed in ESSER 2 into the, we'll be breaking out ESSER into the various 1, 2, and 3 categories because those need to be tracked separately. On ESSER 2, we are getting about $4.2 million. And I have a spreadsheet that shows what that is. I don't think there was any other reports here that I was going to cover.
I agree.
So let me see if I can share. Okay. So here's the ESSER 2 and 3 funding summary. We have $4,187,000 in ESSER 2 funds that expire in September of 2023. So basically about a little over 2 years to expend these. And those have mostly all been allocated at this point, areas identified where we would use those funds. There's about $500,000 miscellaneous set aside, not quite determined exactly what it will be used for, and 52,000 unallocated. But you can see the categories of the expenditures, for equipment and technology, air handlers, filters, PPE, and those type of things. Some salaries and benefits related to overtime, transportation, summer programs, lost revenue in athletics, etc. ESSER 3 is $9,404,000. Those can be used through September of 2024. Plans for those need to be developed in the next 30 to 60 days or so. And there are more requirements with ESSER 3 than there were with ESSER 1 and 2. Steve will need to, get with Jill and, basically there were some activities required in terms of public participation, similar to what's done with title funds, where we invite the public to comment on things. So there's, again, some unique requirements that need to be addressed with ESSER 3 funding. So we definitely need to speak more about that.
So can I ask a question? When we're looking at a board agenda, like for Thursday, and it's going to come from ESSER funds, and you know how normally it tells the source of funds?
Yes.
What would the nomenclature be for that?
So we would need to identify, either ESSER 2 or ESSER 3, so that because we specifically need to track it by fund. So going forward, that would be identified that way. In addition, for example, ESSER 3 requires, I think, 20% of the funding to be used for learning recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So, those need to be specifically identified and tracked separately because when we do our expenditure reports to the state, those need to be identified. Otherwise, we will not be in compliance, and then there's a risk that they could, recapture some of those funds. The other thing is, we had a finance committee meeting last week, just to kind of review status of forecast. And with Brian and Daphne, basically we discussed the use of funds in terms of ESSER funds and their impact on the forecast. Since many of these activities, or most all the activities, are going to be incremental to the forecast, I think it's prudent, and I'm not including any of these funds as offsets to projected funding. To the extent there's excess funds that can be used to offset normal expenditures or recurring expenditures, that would be a benefit to the forecast. But if they were not available, and if we included those in the forecast, then the forecast could end up getting worse. So I think, to be conservative, we'll keep these funds outside of the general fund forecast. Any questions on that? Okay. Also thought, under the category of other, since we don't have the forecast for this evening, food service. I met with Linda Green this past week and reviewed the status of where we are with food service. As you recall, we originally were projecting about a $300,000 deficit, where we might need to advance funds from the general fund, and those were put into the forecast. Subsequent to that now, our federal reimbursements are significantly higher due to the fact that all lunches were designated as free. So we're capturing revenues for all meals served at the federal reimbursement rates. So we are seeing increased funding there, which makes the results better. If you look up here, if you can see the top breakfast and lunch line, we were doing about 1.7 million in 2019. That dropped to 1,355,000 in 20, mostly because of COVID. And then, where it impacted the latter part of the year. And you can see this year we have almost nothing in terms of sales. So mostly all the revenue coming in for food sales now is federal reimbursements for breakfast and lunch. And you can see those are at one point projected to be 1,558,000 versus 2019 being a normal year, about 1.1 million. That basically helped us to eliminate the deficit. We still have a loss for the year, projected loss of about 154,000. But because we started the year with 344,000 in cash, that should leave about 190,000 in the food service fund. So we do not need to advance any funds from the general fund to cover any losses. And then hopefully school year 2022 will be back to normal, and we can end up, becoming profitable again, or at least breaking even. So that's one good news story in terms of the forecast impacts.
And that's outside the ESSER money, right? This is a
Yes.
totally different program.
Yes, food service is a different fund, a totally separate fund. Gehenna, historically, it's been positive, and we were building up a cash balance. As you can see, at the end of 19, we had a little over $500,000 in that account. It dropped to 344,000 at the end of 2020, and it was projected to go very negative this year, but the federal funding has now made up for those losses.
Is that, the excess funding that is in that account, is that what we use? Is that, I don't know how to ask the question correctly, but is that where the Fill My Tummy Fund money goes? So is that the money that gets used when, in normal times, when students aren't able to buy a hot lunch? Or is that a totally separate?
Fill My Tummy is separate, and it would be donations. So they would make donations into food service.
Have we used this overage to build the Fill My Tummy Fund? I guess I don't know, what are we doing with, if you're saying that we have been accumulating an overage, what is it that we do with that?
Well, we were up until 2019, and then the fund went negative in 2020 because of the COVID near the end of the year. So we ended up the year with a loss of 223,000, which dropped our cash balance to 344. It's always good to have a cash balance that you can use for equipment, purchase, modernization of that.
That's my question. What is it that cash balance was being used for or anticipated to be used for?
Yeah, it would definitely be, for any type of equipment, unusual type of expenditures or things that might occur, any interruption in food service like we had with COVID. So that's why you always want to carry a balance so that this general fund would not need to advance money or transfer money to cover any shortfalls. We had a healthy balance at the 567,000. That's a fairly healthy balance.
Too healthy, right?
Yeah.
That, I think, is actually my question. At what point, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mrs. Mooring. I just was trying to figure out if we get to that point again. I mean, is that when we look at what our prices are?
Prices can be reduced, but there are requirements that you maintain certain price levels due to the federal reimbursement amounts. So I don't know all the rules around that, but for example, you can't offer a lunch for 50 cents if the government is reimbursing you $2.50 for it.
If I remember when Linda came and spoke to us, this balance actually has accumulated over time through the sale of extras, or I forget, is that the term they use? Yeah, my kids have been out long enough, I can't remember. But Mom, I bought 3 extras today, right? So it's not through the normal hot plate meal, right? It's really through the extras. If I'm correct. Steve's nodding, I think. Is that right?
I think that's right, Daphne. And I think we should have a full report, maybe at our next meeting on food service, because I think, Mike, they're extending the federal food program into next year, right?
Yes.
And so those funds should continue to grow, because at the end of the day, it's going to be very similar to this year, right, Mike?
I would say so. In terms of our sales will be minimal because the federal, is basically paying for all the lunches. So we're not charging the kids for lunch other than, for example, those extras.
Right.
So Steve, I think I would be curious, are kids taking advantage of those meals? Is that the kind of info you wanted to share?
Yeah, I think having, just a 1-page report just on what, Mike, where we've been with food service, what the federal government has supported, what they're going to continue to support, and what we expect next year. Does that sound good, or Brian, to do something like that? I think maybe we, maybe get something like that on our next agenda, maybe in June.
Okay.
I just want to say that Linda Green, who's done such an excellent job for us in food service, is going to retire at the end of this year. So very sad for us. She's so conscientious and so thoughtful and done such a great job. And so we'll be looking for a new food service director. But maybe one of the last things she could do is sort of help us and report on what has happened this year.
Okay, well, that's all I have for this evening, unless there's some other items or things you'd like to discuss.
On the agenda, we had discussed about the phase 2 facilities.
Yeah. I can review that, Brian. Do you want me to, Mike, are you done?
Yes.
Okay. Brian, do you want to shift to phase 2?
Yeah, I mean, it was there. I just didn't know if, because we had actually bypassed the 5-year forecast. I didn't know if there was really nothing to report at this point, or.
I can just give a high level report on phase 2. A lot's been going on. I have notes in front of me. It won't take me very long if you want me to kind of do that real quick.
That'll work.
Okay. Or we could wait till the 5-year forecast, either way.
What does everyone else think? You know, since we'll be getting the 5-year forecast next week, you think that should piggyback on each other, or?
I think the phase 2 is different and distinct from the 5-year forecast, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's be good to give a report. I'll just do a sort of a high level, a lot of exciting stuff happening. Is that okay, Brian? Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. So we had a steering committee meeting on the 11th, and we have 13 people on our steering committee. DLR and Shore and Russilli, our builders, were there. We just sort of did a high level presentation. Dennis Bain from DLR did it, and just where the state of each of these projects is. So the elementary additions, the middle school additions, and where we are with the high school. We also talked a little bit about the athletic complex out at Blacklick, where we're going to displace current practice fields and softball fields and tennis courts. When we build a new high school, they're going to have to go out at Blacklick. And so there's some exciting, really what we're in now in all of these projects is what's called conceptual design. The next stage will be schematic design and then design development. So right now, what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that everything's in budget. And as we look at the additions to the elementaries and the middle schools, what's really important is to build space like we told the community we needed because we're growing, but also to try to maximize our dollars and try to close the gaps on some of the areas that haven't worked in the buildings maybe, and we can maybe enhance those areas, music rooms, gyms, those kinds of things as we increase classroom space. And so the other process we're working through is called BOLD. So it stands for Bridging Organizational Learning and Design. DLR did a video with us that went out in one of our Friday communications, and we talked about the importance of, as we design these spaces, that we really try to reimagine, reinvent learning at the same time. And so 26 of us, some were architects, many people from the district. We each had a student we shadowed. We, every 15 minutes, put in a Qualtrics form, we typed in what the student was doing, what type of activity it was it whole group, was it small group, was it individual, were the students engaged? And what happened in the afternoon is that data was already uploaded and put into pie charts and graphs, and then we began the work of creating a student profile. So we saw lots of good instruction. My student that I shadowed, his name was Joseph, and he was a second grader at Royal Manor, and we stayed through the lunch period and even went out on recess, and I was really impressed with what was happening in his classroom. It was a very enlightening experience. We saw lots of interesting data. Joseph told me something that was really interesting. He said, I asked him, one of the questions they had us ask at the end was, what did you learn during the pandemic? What did you learn that you missed when you were studying at home and remote learning? And he said at first he was excited to be at home with his mom because she was working from home, and he really kind of enjoyed it. It was like, a novelty at first, but then he started to miss school, miss being on the playground, miss being in his classroom. And so what he ended up doing is he ended up saying to me that I learned that my family was really important to me, but also my school family is very important to me, and I need both. So I thought that was pretty impressive. And so we're going to continue to work over the summer through the BOLD process. Right now, Russilli has some designs in hand, the schematic designs that the principals and the architects and staff have gone over. We're going to cost those out. Russilli is going to do estimation for those. And then soon that development will happen for the middle school, and then down the road, the high school. And so one of the things to keep in mind that's really, I think, important to report for this committee is that right now there's supply chain issues with steel. Much of these renovations are going to be, the material that we're going to use, even the studs, they won't be made out of wood, and the walls will be made out of steel. The trusses for the roofs will be made out of steel. The decking for the roofs will be made out of steel. And right now they're not even making those things because of the supply chain disruption. They don't have the raw material to make them. And so the same thing is true with wood. Wood has skyrocketed in price. Lumber yards during the pandemic were basically shut down. And then when interest rates went down, people started doing additions, started building. What happened is the price of wood, I think it's quadrupled. And so to build a deck, last summer was maybe $900 or something, and now it's like 4 times that. And so at the end of the day, we're concerned about the materials and the expense of them. And it's really, really important that we keep an eye on that. And as we kind of begin to go through conceptual design, schematic design, and then design development, our hope is the production of steel will be back on track, and that the supply chain will, be fixed. But the price could be staggering at this moment. I think it's really important to know that, once we have these cost estimates, we're going to have community meetings. Like we plan to have a meeting at High Point to go over, what the design looks like, to get feedback, to have not just school parents and students and teachers involved, but even people who live in the neighborhoods if they're interested in coming. And so the other thing I'd like to say is, as long as we're talking about facilities, on June 5th, we'll be meeting at Lincoln Elementary. It's a Saturday morning at 11 a.m. And we'll be doing a ribbon cutting. And that same day, Principal Claire will host a pizza party and have kids in the back on the playground. And we'll be doing tours throughout the day of June 5th. The rain day for that day is the next Saturday, June 12th. And then on Sunday, June 13th, we're going to have a day where anyone in the community, if they want to tour the building, they'll be able to come in and we'll give them tours. So lots of exciting stuff. I'll try to answer that's sort of a high level view. I'll try to answer any questions anybody has.
I was just wondering about that because I know when we did the tour, they were saying that this is for like students, and then it will go to the general public. So I was just making sure that, we're not telling, our friend, hey, this is going on at at Lincoln, when they're not actually, they're just a resident, but they're not a student or a parent of students.
Yeah.
Just that ribbon cutting.
Yeah. So the party is for, I think what you're getting at, Brian, is for the students. And what Claire is trying to do is bring people together because of redistricting. We have a lot of new families that haven't met one another. So we want to have some time where parents can watch their kids play on the playground, exchange phone numbers, maybe organize some play dates. It was impressive. Claire and a team of teachers actually went out to Waterford Park and was in one of the parks there. And that's an area that's going to be redistricted to Lincoln. And this was Sunday afternoon, and they just kind of fielded questions for an hour and a half. And Claire is very intentional and planning things like that I think are going to be great. She's not just, welcoming students and parents to a new school. They're in the process of building a new school community, and because of redistricting. So there'll be close to 700 kids at Lincoln, and it's a big process. And so we've also, done some, asked for people to volunteer to teach there, because we're going to have to shift some teachers from other schools over. And then people have interviewed for jobs, and that process is well underway and almost finished. So lots of exciting stuff. Hope everybody can make it on June 5th. So far on the Sign Up Genius, we have over 500 people signed up. So that's a lot of pizza. And one of the parents from Lincoln owns a pizza shop. And so the PTA is going to use his company. It's called Dewey's Pizza it's good stuff. I've had it. And so hopefully all of you can make it Saturday, and hopefully we won't have rain on June 5th. So Brian, I'm sorry, maybe that was a little longer than I
Oh,
promised.
no, thank you. Thank you for your update. Does it, I know I kind of figured you may have already had the pizza. So does anyone have any other questions, concerns, or anything? Okay, well, looks like it's a 7:20, and I guess we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Good night. Thanks.